another episode of the Bull City Bravest podcast. I'm Tim McCoy, and today I'm here with some friends that are near and dear to me. Today I have a special guest. When I tell you this podcast is for firefighters, by firefighters, unscripted. This is truly what it is. Today I was walking down admin's hallway, and I was just, going to get some water, and I seen a living legend walking through the hallways. Captain Sean Boone, retired from the DFD. You were here. Luckily for us, the class you were going to teach today got canceled, so you had some free time, and you decided that you would be willing to do this podcast. So first of all, just thank you, Captain Boone. Thank you for coming in. How you feeling?
Great, glad to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Listen, if you don't know who Captain Boone is, don't worry, you're going to find out very shortly. But as always, I have producer Patrick in the back. Producer Patrick, how you feeling?
I'm feeling fantastic. Yeah, the Academy's loss was our gain today with Captain Boone. You were going to do history with him? What were you going to talk to him about?
Yeah, teach a DFD history class to all the new recruits.
And quite a historian you are. If anybody wants to know anything about the DFD, you have been the go-to guy. But before we get into that, let's just tell us a little bit about yourself. Like how long you're in the DFD, how you got into the DFD. Just tell us your story.
Well, I grew up in western North Carolina, a little town called Burnsville. It's in Yancey County. We moved to Durham when I was in 11th grade. My dad got a job at the Research Triangle Park. When I got out of high school, my mom saw the ad in the Durham paper about the fire department hiring, and she called me and asked me if I was interested. And I asked her why did she ask me this, like what made, and she said, well, you love that show Emergency when you were a kid. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. So she kind of got on me about it. Every few days she'd call me, and I stopped at Station 2 on 9th Street one day. They were washing the trucks. And I got out and I talked to the guys, and they all just talked about what a great job it was. And I could tell, I could already see the brotherhood with those guys. So I applied, and I didn't get hired. And
that's when you were 18.
I was 19.
19.
I was 19. So I applied 3 times. Third time was a charm. I got hired, and I started here March of 1989 in this building here, and 32 years later to the month, I retired, which was 4 years ago.
Wow, so it's been 4 years?
4 years, yeah.
Wow, because I remember, well, first of all, what academy were you in?
Number 5.
Number 5.
Yeah.
And so 1989 is when you got hired.
Yep.
You were, how old? You say you applied 3 times.
I was 22.
22. Mm-hmm. Now, you said this was like your mom prompted you to do this, right?
Yes,
And it obviously turned into a great career for you. What when you finally got into it, and you went through the academy, like what were your thoughts? Like, was it what you thought it was going to be, or is it a little different?
Oh yeah, before if you don't have any real knowledge of the fire service, like you have a relative or a good friend that's in it, you don't really know what to expect. And once the academy started, once we got out on the training grounds and we started doing live fire training, throwing ladders, pulling hose, doing all the firefighter stuff. You gotta remember, this is pre-EMS days. We weren't doing EMS back then. The academy was nothing but fire related.
Wow.
And I literally remember the first time in the burn building, being on the nozzle, putting the fire out. They're going to pay me to do this job. I mean, I just couldn't believe it.
It's like a dream, right? Like
it was great. And I got out in the field. I went to Station 2 on B shift. Great group of guys. At that time, there was 2 engines there and a ladder and a chief. So there was quite a few guys there.
Did you meet any of the people that when initially you say you went to Station 2, did you recognize any of those guys?
I didn't know any of those. No, that wasn't. I didn't recognize anybody, no. It wasn't the same guys. But I worked my first year there. It was great. Going back to the academy, when I was in the academy, Rescue 11, which is now Rescue 1, came out to show us their truck and the hearse tools and their rope rescue stuff and all that. And so I actually asked them, what what do you guys, do you just respond to rescue calls? And one of the guys said, no, we actually go to every structure fire in the Durham. Back that time, Durham was fighting a lot more fire, pretty much a fire every day.
Yeah.
And, more than a day. I think my first year, Durham, because I remember seeing the memo, I've actually got it. It was like 475 working fires that year, so it was more than one a day.
I remember those. I hear a lot of stories about those war years, like just being super busy.
So I'm like, you go to every structure fire. I said, what do you have to do to be on this truck? And he said, well, you got to be an EMT. So as soon as I graduated the academy, I enrolled at Durham Tech in the EMT program, and that's when it was like twice a week for like 3 months. I got my EMT, and then after a year, I got an opportunity to get transferred to Station 1 on A shift. And I knew that's where the rescue was at, that I would probably get to fill in there. And that's exactly what happened. And another great group of guys. I ended up working there with those guys for 4 years. And then I went to Engine 3, the old Station 3 on Main, and main driver. And a great crew. Captain Tony Freeman was the captain there. Just unbelievable experience, a lot of fire, a lot of work. While I was there, and it's when the EMS started. They started the EMT program in '93, and we.
Was it EMT or was it first responder?
First responder.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
first responder. But everybody had to become an EMT,
right.
which I was already an EMT. At first, we ran every call that EMS ran. There wasn't any differentiator. There wasn't. If it's a headache call, we still went. So Engine 3 all of a sudden was rolling about 18, 20 calls a day in that district. So I'm not sure. I can't remember how long we went like that. Probably 6 months. Some of the engines, like 1, 4, these engines were just rolling a lot of calls. And they end up having only life-threatening, so-called life-threatening calls.
Uh-huh.
So that cut some of the calls back, but those districts still stayed very busy because you still had a lot of the Few Gardens housing project was right there. That was gone. Like a lot of the neighborhoods, was different then, which just kept you busy.
So the EMS kind of basically stepped y'all up on top of the fires back in the years.
It was a bit, yeah. Like my very first EMS call I ever ran was a cardiac arrest. So it was like you just kind of got through into it. It wasn't like a sick call or something. It was literally, and dealing with that kind of stuff was more on the fire side, if fire victims and things, but just going to a regular cardiac arrest, we didn't go to that because we weren't answering first responder calls, as they call it. So it changed the department big time. A lot of the guys that had been on the department, and understandably so, they were ready to go. The guys that had their time in or close to their time, because it changed the job dramatically.
I'm about to say, was a lot of people that didn't like that? Was there
a
lot of pushback? And that's one of many things I was going to say, because you came in '89 and you retired around 2021, 2021, because I remember it's a little post-COVID, kind of post-COVID.
March of 21.
And so, with that being said, in those years that you did, right, I imagine you seen a lot of changes. What are some of the biggest changes you've seen in fire service in that time?
Well, for Durham specifically, there was 10 stations when I started, and there was 19 when I retired, so it almost doubled in size.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, just the sheer call volume, automatic fire alarms, with more businesses being built, more people having smoke detectors, things like that, home fire alarms. The call volume just went up dramatically. To give you an example, Durham probably running, when I first started, 7,000-8,000 calls a year with over 400 working fires. So most of the calls were fire related. And when I retired, I think it shot up to 38,000 calls.
Oh wow!
So the sheer call volume just dramatically increased. Another big change would be the manpower. When I first came, they sent 2 engines, a ladder, the rescue company, and a battalion chief to a structure fire. That's it.
So 5, 6 companies.
Yeah. And so the first engine usually, is going to pull the line. Second engine, if they need the water source, is going to catch the water source. Rescue is going to search. Ladder is going to ventilate. And you got one guy in charge. That is it. There was nobody else.
Yeah.
And you had a lot of old school chiefs back then who they weren't going to call a second alarm unless they really, really had to. Like, we're going to get this done with the guys we have on the scene.
Right.
So it really puts you, it was just different because you just, you had very few firefighters on the scene, really. When I say firefighters, I mean guys riding the back of the truck. Because we ride them with 3. So you got the drivers helping, the 2 drivers are getting the water source and doing the driver duties. And then the captains, they're directing the work. So the guys on the guys in the back are the ones doing the physical work.
Like 3 or 4 people really doing work.
Really, yeah. So so that was a huge change when I left. Going up to 5 engines, 2 ladders, a rescue, safety officer, 2 chiefs.
Yeah.
And there's like extra people coming now that wasn't even coming when I left, like an EMS supervisor. I'm not sure who else is even coming now because I don't know all the people that's coming. But
it's definitely vamped up.
And if you call for a second alarm now, you've got a lot of people on the scene. So that was a huge change just in the manpower on the scene. You just didn't have as many people. So you had to go to work, and you had to go to work fast and get it done. And again, the sheer call volume, I can remember when I first came on, a busy day was 4 or 5 calls. When I was on engine 2, later in my career, which at that time was the busiest engine in the city, it was nothing to have a 20-call day.
Yeah.
And you just didn't sleep.
Duke would eat y'all up.
Yeah,
Duke would eat y'all up, yes.
Duke, a lot of calls at Duke, but just like the paperwork stuff, when the computer age came about, a lot more paperwork stuff came up. The report system got complex.
Yes.
Before, it was typing, right? It was a sheet of paper typed. Didn't take long at all. Just the stuff that you put in, your monthly reports, your training logs. I mean, it's documenting everything, documenting, checking the SCBAs every day. I mean, those are things that just didn't exist early on. The captains, when I first came on, didn't have that many, I call them, administrative duty type stuff that kept you in the office. That changed dramatically. So, it's technology grew, but, the things that technology, of course, has played a good role in some things, like thermal imager cameras.
Right.
I kind of always would say there's 3 big advances in firefighting ever when they went from horses to motorized apparatus. When you went from your lungs to SCBAs. Right. And then going from not being able to see in a fire to being able to see. And when they were testing the thermal imagers, it was like we tested them, and I was the rescue tested them. I was assigned to Rescue 1 then. We tested several, and I just couldn't believe this. When we started, and this was in, I don't know, 97, somewhere around there, that we first started getting them. And now every company has them now. Yeah. But then only the rescue had them, and then it branched out as they got cheaper, because I think the first one we bought was over $20,000, and it was very large too. It was like a movie camera almost. So it was the technology as far as that. Those are good things. I'd rather not have had the computers and all that. Yeah. But yeah.
I mean, because me and Captain Burton was in here as well. He was like, our test run episode, and we talked about some of those things. A lot of these legacy firefighters. I work at Redwood part time. Yeah. So Chief Clements, he always be like, I've never seen so many firefighters in my life to a fire, because he came back in the day where you didn't have to. And then Captain Shazo, of course, you worked alongside him for a number of years, right? And he would always say, he would tell me stories like, hey, if you got a fire and you cancel units, like, you better make sure you put that fire out. Like, if it was like let's say a kitchen fire, you better make sure you can handle it, because you would never call for help again, because that would just be like the end of it for you. So he was always like, man, every be times we done cancel people and then it ended up being more than what we thought it was, and we had to
You didn't call them back.
Definitely didn't want to call him back. So
I was on a couple of those where the captain's like, yeah, we got to put this out ourselves.
yeah, so
because it would be embarrassing to call them back.
So it's definitely like you said. I never really thought about it the way you stated. Like there's definitely been, you know, I would say like you said, the engines, the air packs, and then just the technology aspect.
Yeah.
Everything is getting so much, like I said, better or worse. It depends. You can see fire in the wall now, but when it comes to report writing, you definitely have a lot more responsibilities. As far as I think when I first came on, we only the captains had a radio, if I remember.
Well, the drivers did.
The drivers.
Yeah. So originally just the drivers and the captains. Funny, I got a story about that.
Okay.
So I'd written a letter. I was captain on ladder 1. This is in like 2008-ish. And I was really getting concerned about firefighters not having a radio. I felt like we should have a radio. The firefighters should have a radio. So I wrote a letter through the chain of command about getting radios for the firefighters. And they pretty much said, we'll figure it out. If you can get it done, do it. You know, but they just put it in my lap. So the first thing I did was call the radio shop. Mm-hmm. And Rick Rassman, who was the director then, I told him what I wanted. And he said, yeah, I've got them. I said, we need, 2 radios per unit, meaning per truck, with extra batteries and chargers too.
All right.
I said, what's that going to cost? He said, nothing. So
what?
I said, what are you talking about? And I like, my hearing's not as good as it used to be. You say nothing?
All right.
He said, yeah, I've got them. I'll just give them to the fire department. And I'm like, oh, why haven't we done this before? He says, well, no one's asked me. I didn't know you needed them. So I immediately wrote a letter back and say, hey, we're going to get them. And next thing I know, every firefighter had radios then. So my battalion chief, Bill Atkins, wrote me an award. They give a safety award.
Right.
To awards banquets. So I never thought in my career I'd ever get a safety award, but I got one.
Just for asking. It's crazy. That's all you had to do and get what you wanted.
I was trying to get a price.
Right.
To see if it was something that the fire department would do. But from then on, we had them. And so you just never know.
I just gotta ask.
You just gotta ask.
I gotta ask.
Sometimes.
Hey Patrick, what we need, man? What we need? We gotta ask somebody. Apparently,
I need a drone. I could use a nice new drone. I've been really trying to save up for an Xbox. If you guys
but that's that simple. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously you've been on the fire department for a lot of years, and I've always known you to be considered like the ladder king. When I first came on, it was you, Todd Elliott. I think Nate was your rookie at the time. Nate Taylor, Captain Nate Taylor now, and then you also Bentley, Chris Bentley, and Todd Zilla. Did I say Todd?
Yeah, Todd was my driver. Daryl Moore. Alan Browning.
You've always been at busy stations as far as I remember, because I remember you being the ladder kings. I was telling Bert, because Antoine, we had a story where Antoine came to row the Station 7, because I was assigned to Station 7 with Captain Shazo. And he came, because he always rode with you guys, I thought he was a ladder king.
Yeah, he was actually on the engine, but he'd cross the floor. Yeah.
Right, but me being young in my career, I thought he was like the ventilation guy. And it came time to ventilate the roof, and he was not the ventilation guy. Nothing against him, but
heck of a nozzleman.
He is a great,
yeah.
But I was going to say, like, over the years, you've been at a lot of great assignments. What's been your favorite? What have been some of your favorite assignments, and why? And what was one that was like your least favorite? And you don't have to give the why, but just like.
Well, so, first off, any good firefighter out there, they're a good firefighter because they work with good people. Right. Bottom line. And I had some unbelievable mentors. I told you I started at Station 2. Some awesome guys up there. When I went to Station 1, on A shift, guys like Talton Wood, John Renner, George Odell, Wanda Shazo, Tom Harris, who was one of the original black firefighters hired, was my captain.
A lot of legends.
Bill Ralston, Lennis Harris, Terry Hardiman, Jeff Roberts, not the Jeff Roberts that's here currently now, but another Jeff. I mean, there was a lot of. There was actually another guy named Lonnie Boone, who they call us the Boone Brothers. You know, Lonnie. So, just unbelievable guys who wanted to go to work. You know, when you work with people who want to work,
right,
and want to train and get better at their job, it makes all the difference. So I was blessed with that, and I was also blessed to go down to Station 3 with Tony Freeman and the guys down there. That's what molds you. So you asked my favorite assignment. So it's hard to say. I obviously enjoyed those times, but when they started the technical rescue team in '96, they put us at Station 5. We got that truck. We stocked it. We had to build everything ourselves. A guy named Bruce Lynch, retired driver. He's a welder, fabricator. He fabricated all the shelves in there. Jimmy Reardon was my captain, and Bill Towner and George Odell were the captains on the other two shifts. They were all rescue guys. I was fortunate enough to get picked for that team. We did a lot of training. I mean, it was really 2 years of nonstop classes, getting certified, and everything from building collapse, swift water, confined space, rope rescue, a lot of extricate. I mean, it was just constant, and that was just right up in my wheelhouse of what I wanted to do. And it started out it was like this. You would get assigned permanently to rescue from there. A lot of people started out there. Even though I'd filled in rescue a lot early in my career, once it became the technical rescue team, meaning Rescue 1, which used to be Rescue 11, they changed the name, and then Engine 5, which is now, it's on Ladder 2, I believe, which it's been for ever since I left. But that was a great moment of my career right there.
Just being part of the TRT team.
Just being a part of starting something new. You know? And then I left there to go to Rescue, because Rescue 1 used to be a promotion. Everybody on the truck was promoted. There was you had to be a driver's rank to be on the rest, to be assigned there permanently.
Right.
So then I went up back to 1 on the rescue, and those are some great years too. And I but when I made captain in 01, I got assigned to Engine 3. And it was really just an awesome time in my career. I had really great guys. I had Travis Melvin, Jim Barr, I had Chris Inuzzi. Then I ended up getting Marty Pierce after Chris got promoted to captain, and now Chris is like the deputy chief. We were just extremely busy, and it was just that has a special place in my heart right there.
The Red Devil.
But then I got asked to go to Ladder 1 by Chief Atkins. I'll tell you a story. The Red Devil. You said the Red Devil. So I, being a history guy, knew that they used to call Engine 3 the Red Devil back in the early 1900s. And they called it the Red Devil not out of affection. They called it the Red Devil because when they got their first motorized apparatus, it kept breaking down. This was in 1915. So what they would do is they would pull the steamer behind it because they knew the steamer would work if they had to pump. So they started calling the engine the Red Devil. Well, this somehow got kind of lost, and I discovered this doing some research, and I wanted to bring it back. So we went to a sign shop over off Gear Street and said, how much would it cost to put Red Devil above the windshield? And I forget what it was, maybe $35 or something. And I said, okay, I'll come back. So we can do it right now, it won't take no time. So I'm thinking, I got to get permission for this, So my guys, of course, who they were, come on, Captain, do it.
Firemen always going to push it. They always it's a line and they always going to cross it.
Let's just do it. Let's do it. So what we did is I invited Chief Bibby, who was the assistant chief of suppression, for dinner one night at Station 3. And he was a Vietnam vet, and I knew he was all about the military, esprit de corps, and we get talking about that at dinner. He said, I'm all about esprit de corps and company pride. And I said, I'm glad you said that. I want to show you something. And
now that you bring it up.
Now that you bring this up. So we go out on the bay floor, and I showed him where it says Red Devil above the windshield. And he's just staring at it. I'm like, I'm in trouble. He's going to say, take that off. He said, Boone, I love it. if anybody gives you any mess about it, he didn't say mess.
Yeah, obviously.
He said, you tell him I gave you permission ahead of time.
That's solid.
So then other companies started, the Wabash Express, other companies started putting
it was definitely, I think 3 and 4 are the only 2 units when I got here that really has
and I got a patch made.
The company
patch
slogan.
And all that. So that was a special time, but Bill Atkins was my battalion chief, and in 05 he asked me to go to Ladder 1. And at that, the rescue truck had been disbanded in 2000. And the day it got disbanded, so we knew that it was going to be disbanded. I was writing acting captain that day. We had ran a call. This is May 20th of 2000 at around 9:30 in the morning. Not that I
very
remember it well.
Very specific.
And we had a call, and we're coming back, and he called me on the radio and said, "I need you to come back to Station 1." This is my battalion chief was Bruce Pagan, who ended up being chief of the department. And so I went over back to Station 1, and he said, "I need you to go ride Captain number 4 to Captain's went home." And I said, "What about Kenny Smart and Cleve Sawyer will ride in the back?" He said, "I'll put one guy on the engine, one guy on the ladder. You're going on that service." I said, "Just for the whole day?" He says, "Actually, for good." He said, "We're going to, again, we knew that it was going to be disbanded. We didn't know when." And in the back of my mind, I kept thinking maybe it won't be. But anyway, he said they're taking it out of service today, right now. And so I knew the code for going out of service obviously is 10.7. Like, we're not available. But I knew there was another code for like out of service, and I didn't know what it was. So I called communications on the phone on the bay floor, and I think the communicator was Charlie Brown. He said it was 1042 was the code going completely out of service. So I hung up the phone. I got on the radio. I said, "Rescue 1." He answered. He said, "Go ahead, Rescue 1." I said, "Mark, Rescue 1, 1042. So that was the last traffic for that truck for 19 years.
In 2000.
Yes, it's in 2000. So in 2019 it came back. So when it came back, we worked the first day. I got the honor of being chosen as one of the captains. I got to call the truck back in service. So I got to call it out of service and back in service 19 years apart. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But going back to the Ladder 1 days, when I got sent to Ladder 1, the ladder trucks had become basically your rescues. All extrication, rope rescue, which they already did rope rescue and stuff like that, but they didn't do extrication then. But they put extrication on all the ladder companies. So really, I miss doing rescue stuff. And I love being on Engine 3. It was a great time of my career as a firefighter and as a captain. But get on Ladder 1, it was great. And the guys we talked about were my guys on the Ladder 1. And it was just a great time of my career. I ended up staying there 5 years. And then went to Ladder 2, but I just I don't have. When you asked me the original question, what was my favorite? It's hard to say. I loved it all. And even if I ever got in a situation where I didn't like, I was at Station 7 for a little while, and nothing wrong with Station 7. I just missed the inner city. I'd worked in the inner city 1, 2, 3, and 5 are all inner city companies. I just really liked it, and being out at 7 that far north, I didn't like it as much. But I never had I always say, your worst day at the fire department is better than any other day at any other job. That's how I feel about the fire department.
That's a fact.
And I never once thought, and it's funny when I knew that, like. And for Tim worked with me. Tim was my driver on Rescue 1 when I retired. All the guys on the truck with us, then you weren't even born when I started.
Yeah.
So, when I realized I was kind of aging out of the job, and I didn't want, when I told you guys I was going to retire, you guys, well, do you want me to go? And I'm like, look, I'm not the same as I was, and I want to be at the top of my game when I leave here. And, I don't think people understand that. Like, if I couldn't be the best, I felt like you guys were an all-star team, and if I couldn't be the leader of the all-star team, then I didn't want to be here. And that's pretty much was my decision to go.
That was by the way, I thought that was very noble of you, because you, like I said, you pulled us aside. You said, "Hey, like I'm going to retire. I don't want to be. I don't want to." Basically said, if I can't be the best on the truck, then I don't want to. I don't think I want to be here.
I mean, you age out. You
Hey.
just do. It's a fact. It's a younger person's job. You know, it's like an athlete. When you get older, your skills diminish. And yeah, I could have tried to go for chief or maybe go to a solar company. This is in my DNA. And you know, a lot of people who don't know this, it's like, and I never forget you looking over at me driving to the fire off Lynn Road that day. My last call was a working structure fire, and that's like hitting a home run your last at bat or something.
We wanted that so bad for you.
It was great, you know, and a lot of people watch this and say, "Oh, you're glad somebody's house burned," and it's the same thing with the military. Like, you don't want anything bad happening to anybody,
right?
But you train for the worst, and if you want to be the one, right? You want to be the one to help people. You want to be the one to answer the call. You want to be the one to go and try to save them from a fire or work on cardiac arrest or extricate them out of a car. We've all seen horrific things, and they're not good memories. But the good memories are the people that we saved and we were able to help and change lives. And I honestly, I believe I was meant to be a firefighter. I believe I believe that my mom, it wasn't an accident to ask me that. Like, something told her
it was ordained. It's meant to be.
It was like, I can't imagine ever doing anything else with my life. And other than being a husband and a parent, there's nothing to me. The fire service is a big part of my life. I have a son who's on the Winston-Salem Fire Department.
Shout out to Dalton.
And I still have the connection to it. And I still care about the Durham Fire Department. That's why I teach the history class, because I want the guys and gals that get here to know, history is important. You need to know who came here before you. And, some of them are probably interested, some are not. But, one of the classes I did, I said at the very end, I always tell them, now go out and make your history. You're now part of this history. You're going to... And I left here, and I just get up the road here a little bit, and I get a phone call from Carl Hamlin. He's captain on Rescue 1 on C Shift, and he said, "Hey, brother, where you at?" I said, "I'm in Durham." He said, "Well, did you hear about the big explosion downtown? It just happened." I said, "No, I hadn't heard anything about it." He said, "It's bad." He said, "There's people hurt, firefighters hurt." Mm-hmm. So I made a U-turn in the middle of Roxborough Road, and I went and got my gear, and I got home like, I don't know what time it was, midnight. Yeah. So it was, when I said you never know when history's going to happen to those guys that day, it literally was happening. I was telling them that.
Yeah.
And it was one of the big, incidents that's ever happened here. So that's why I think history is important. I think it's important for people to know where they come from, because that's how you know where you're going. And the Durham Fire Department has a great history. Durham is Durham got a late. There's a late bloomer as cities. Like Hillsboro's way older than Durham, right? Because Durham didn't start till after the Civil War, and it was a crossroads. It was because of the surrender at Bennett Point out there with the Union soldiers discovered tobacco. And they end up taking it back up north, and they're like, "Hey, I want some more of this." And Durham a lot of tobacco was being grown. And
I'll tell you the history lessons here. Hold on.
That's how the city of Durham grew.
Wow.
Durham was the center of the tobacco industry.
Leggett Myers, right? Yeah.
American tobacco. It started out with Duke tobacco, and that's Duke University, Duke Hospital. Well, Duke tobacco, and the federal government actually made them. They said they were a monopoly because they control like 98% of tobacco in the world in the late 1800s. So they made them split, and that became Leggett Myers and American tobacco.
Okay.
And that's why there was split. But yeah, that's how Durham grew. And then of course it had textiles like a lot of North Carolina towns do, hosiery mills and different things like that. But tobacco, and I graduated from Northern Durham High School in '84. a lot of the kids that I went to school with, their parents worked at tobacco factories, and that's what they wanted to do because they were high-paying jobs. They didn't know that it was going to be the end, coming pretty quick by the late '80s. But before then, Durham smelled like tobacco. Like when the tobacco factories were rolling, as soon as you got near downtown, you could smell the tobacco, and it was everywhere in the city.
And a lot of their buildings, downtown especially, are revitalized, and they reuse those buildings, repurpose
Oh, yeah,
them.
absolutely. Yeah, the tobacco, Brightleaf Square, American Tobacco Facility.
Engine One, actually, their sign now, their company patch.
Yeah, I got one. Yeah,
has the tobacco leaves on it.
Yeah,
well,
the patches originally on the truck had tobacco leaves on them.
Yeah,
it wasn't the fire department patch. It
was
it
was the City of Durham logo was tobacco
leaves.
Yeah, so it has a rich history. I do want to backtrack for a second because you talked about your retirement, and I know that day for me, A shift, we went on the truck, and we knew it was your final day. But I think for us as a company, because we had worked together at that point, I think it was 3 years at that point on Rescue One, and you brought me up on Rescue One, which I was forever grateful for that privilege. Because when I first started, there was no rescue company. Yeah. Like you said, they had got disbanded, but there was Engine 7, which was the rescue or technical rescue, and 16 was the other technical rescue company at the time, and then the whole swap. And but I say that to say, when you brought us up, I was very excited about being, because that was like the dream. Because like you said, the guy said, we go to all the structure fires in the city. And at that point, we had heard that rescue was going to go to all structure fires and basically all the calls you want to go to. As a firefighter, you want to go to all the cool stuff. The rescue one is the pinnacle. There's a lot of haters. There's going to be a lot of hate with that statement. But truly, if you want to go to all the exciting things, rescue is the thing. So, but just knowing your history and knowing you was one of the Ladder Kings, right? We talked about, me and Captain Burton talked about Chief Atkins, and how, from my perspective, being at Station 2, I felt like he ran a monopoly himself when it came to, because Chief Atkins was always going to look out for Battalion 1 units. Yeah. Even if he's in Battalion 2 or...
Very low.
Very low. He was going to... Whatever, if Engine 1 was there, if Ladder 1 was there, y'all were going to get the good jobs, and everyone else was going to be. And Chief Atkins, respectfully, just ran the shift, right? Like, he was the battalion chief. He would be what is considered a division chief now. So, I could not at the time stand Battalion 1 units, just because y'all always got the good assignments. But I was saying, you always been in Battalion 1, like the Ladder Kings. Someone, it's that whole joke. I've been on more roofs than Santa Claus. And I talked about how, also with Captain Burton, how you guys made the roof. And there was a lot of chirp about you guys doing photo ops on the roof. And we're not to get into that. Yeah. But, because you guys will always be on the roof. Like, you guys cut a lot of holes. Yeah. But when you are the definition of fire, like you lived, eat, and breathed fire department. So when it came time to retire, it was just kind of hard to believe it was actually like you were willing to give it up that easy. I say it seemed easy. You had came to a point where you were okay with it. And,
well, I wasn't. It wasn't easy. Matter of fact, I used to have this dream nightmare leading up. People were always asking, when are you going to leave? When I got over 30 years in, and then 31 and 32, and so I used to have this dream where I put my retirement paperwork in, and then I wanted to take it back, and they wouldn't let me, and I would wake up from this dream, and I'd be like, oh, it was just a dream. Because I didn't want to retire, but as time went by, and a lot of guys, like Captain DeShazo left, and then Todd Elliott left, a lot of guys that were my peers. And it was time for a new generation to take over. And I knew that. And I knew that selfishly I could have, I could stay. Mm-hmm. I know I'd still be on Rescue 1 today probably if I wanted to stay. But, I think I used to hear a lot of the guys talking about, you'll know when it's time to go. Uh-huh. And I just couldn't see myself not being at the top of my game. And I knew that I was aging out. And it meant more to me to go out on top than to stay past my prime. That's just the way I looked at it. And I just call it pride, whatever. I knew it was time, and I didn't want to go out, because you guys were all stars as far as I was concerned. You guys were. It was hard for me to keep up with you anymore. And it's just, I just felt like it was time to go, and I just think that everybody hits that moment. It wasn't because I was mad or didn't love the job anymore. None of that. I used to get messed with a lot of guys, like, when I was very young in the fire service. Oh, you're so eat up with this. What have you been here 5 years? You won't be so eat up. And then at 5 years, they'd say, well, what have you been here 10? And then what have you been here 20 and 20? And I just never got tired of the job itself. I love training. I love going to the calls. I love helping people. I loved everything about it. I love the camaraderie. The fire service is a great job, especially anybody that comes, I played sports growing up. I love sports. I love being part of a team. The fire service is exactly that.
Yeah.
You've got a locker room. You've got the brother and sisterhood. You've got training, which is practice,
it's the closest thing you can get to like a team.
It's a physical job.
Physical, right?
You got to be in shape. You got to keep in shape. It's just got everything. The job. The worst part of the job is being just away from your family. That's the worst. You're gonna miss things, and that's tough.
Let's talk about that, because there's a lot of people who are looking to get into the fire service, and they may be watching this and saying, what advice would you have for somebody, like just the pros and cons on the fire service? Like, what is something you would give to someone looking to get into this career? Because a lot of times what I'm finding when I'm out recruiting people, I'm finding people, a lot of them don't have that history or don't have any connection to the fire service. And they don't know anything about it. So what is something you tell them?
Well, number one, you got to have a work ethic, because you're going to work. Everything from keeping the station up, the truck up, to training, to doing the calls. It's a physical, dirty job. You live above a garage. Basically, you're going to be dirty a lot. You're going to be sweating a lot, especially in the summertime in the high humidity state we live in. You've got to have that. If you don't, it's not a job for you. Like my family, we were tobacco farmers when I was growing up. We were sharecroppers, actually. We raised other people's tobacco other than our own. I grew up with a work ethic. My father, toughest, strongest man I ever known in my life, taught me work ethic, and that helped me in the fire service, and so you got to have that. You got to be able to get along with people, because you're staying in the station with them. You might be in a small station, you might be in a big station, but it doesn't matter. You got to get along with people. You got to be understanding of other people's feelings and what they like and what they don't like.
Team player communication skills.
You got to have them.
Yeah.
If not, you're not going to fit in, and a lot of those people don't last. But people who, you can be open-minded to other people. And we don't always going to agree on everything, but you want to respect the people you're working with, but you got to earn that respect too. You're not just going to walk in and get firefighter of the year, but you've got to go in and earn it. And that's people will say, well, I might not like that person, but they're a good firefighter. That's a true statement all day long, right? You don't have to like somebody, but you want someone to say you're a good firefighter. And when I first came on and I was taking all these classes and doing everything I could to further my career, somebody said to me, "Oh, you're trying to be a superstar here, aren't you?" I said, "No. I just want people to say I'm a good fireman. That's it. That was my whole goal. That was it. I wasn't worried about a promotion. I wasn't worried about anything other than when people saw me, they could say anything they want else about me. I'd rather them say I'm a good guy and they like me. But if not everybody's going to like everybody. They're just not. But I just wanted them to say he's a good firefighter. So that along with, you are going to be away from your family 10 days a month. They're 24-hour shifts. Now you're going to get vacation and you're going to get time off. When you get quite a bit of time off actually, but you are going to miss some things from your family, and you can get people to work your shift. And I tried my best to make everything, but I have three kids. They're all grown now, and I have 3 grandchildren. It's like, you have a family, you're going to miss stuff. My wife, the running joke at my house was, only things happened when I was gone.
That is the truth. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen when you're not at home. Just be prepared for it.
Start, a pipe burst.
Yeah.
There's a snake under the house. I mean, these are little things like.
You were the copperhead king.
My wife had to. She broke her hand when I was at work. I never forget, I was at Station 2, and we were on a job, and she had called. I missed it. So I saw she called. Like, she doesn't normally call me in the middle of the day. Something's wrong. And she was at the hospital. She'd fallen and broken her hand. Like, everything always happens when you're at work. So fortunately, I have a great wife who's just take care of business. She just took care of stuff. Other than the broke hand, she did call me for that one. But other than that, I usually found out the next day, or maybe that night in a conversation when I call her in the evening. But that's part of the job. Again, you get time off, and you can get other people to work for you. So it's not you're destined to miss everything on the day you're working. You can make it work, but it takes work. Like one of my kids had a ball game or something I really wanted to go to, or we had some kind of event they had at school, awards, end of the year, something, whatever. I would plan around it the best I could, but there would be occasions, and we worked me and you did, because we worked together at Station 2 before.
We had like a run where we ran like we worked like 4 or 5 Thanksgivings back to back. It was
I kept thinking,
ridiculous.
how does this happen? Like it was like 5 in a row.
5 in a row Thanksgivings.
We worked so
like
many
crazy.
Thanksgivings in a row. The first Thanksgiving that we were off, A shift was off. We had Thanksgiving at my house, and my kids were disappointed that we were at home. My kids love the fire department. They love going to the fire station. They love eating meals there. Yeah. The guys were always great to them.
They love to cheat you in games too, because I played them in a couple of games. Yeah, I can't say the name, but it's an adult version of Trouble at the firehouse. My
kids are competitive.
They're very competitive. I'm about to say they're very competitive. So work ethic, knowing that you're going to work nights and weekends, right? You got to be able to be a good team player and communication skills, and then just knowing that things are going to happen when you're not at home. But luckily, I was telling people, it all depends on what I tell people is, be prepared for all these things. But you do have those, have time off. You can time trade. You can also, if your battalion chief can work it out. Sometimes your battalion chiefs are willing. Like we're not in this career, or even in the Durham Fire Department, they're not buttholes. So if your kid has something going on, they'll try to make it work where you can find that time and be there for your kids. Now, I will say, because I'm recruiting right now, but I will say I've met a lot of people in this career who said, Captain Boone videos brought me here. Like, you used to be the video guy that made all the videos that people would look at.
I've always been a promoter of the fire department. I started out in the early 2000s when the website stuff kind of started.
Angel Fire, was it?
Angel Fire was the website you could go. I actually I had built them up so much I had to pay to have enough memory for everything. And a guy named Donovan Brantley, who used to come to the fire station, he loved the fire department. He really helped me a lot. But yeah, I made several websites for different companies. I started the unofficial fire department webpage, and then when the video kind of thing came on, I started making videos. I would get from Engine 3. We had a video camera. We put it on a traffic cone, and we would put it in the front of the truck and catch some fires as we pulled up. This is before helmet cams came out, so we didn't have that. But yeah, put it to some music. Make some videos. Andy Sinipli made several really good ones, and I found out later. Even Chief Zotto said one of the reasons he knew about Durham was because of my website and the videos.
You had some videos, huh?
And then I made an unofficial Facebook page, and Chief Pagan called me in one day and said they wanted an official Facebook page. Could I make one? And I said, yeah, I'll just take the off of official. It'll be the official Facebook page. And that's the page today.
I'll take the off the official.
That's all it is. And I just kept doing it up until I retired. Would post things on there, pictures, whatever. But yeah, I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, hey, you're the one that did the website? You're the one that made those videos? That's why I came to Durham. So I didn't even know, you don't even know what you're doing sometimes, what you're affecting. I just did it because I love the fire department, and I love the Durham Fire Department especially, and I wanted to make us look good, because a lot of people, they don't even understand about the fire department. They don't know paid versus volunteer. They don't know that you're there. Like they would see you in a grocery store, like, why aren't you at the fire station? Why are you at the grocery store? Well, our truck's out there. we go all over this district. This is our district. You know,
we get stopped a lot.
They don't understand the whole concept of the fire service. I even actually had one guy one time thought we had a cafeteria that they served us food like you would a school lunchroom. I'm like, no, we have to buy all their stuff. We make our own food. It comes out of our pocket, so I was just trying to just show Durham in a good light.
You just had pride in the fire service, and it shows because again, I think a lot of things. I know you said back in the war years, you guys were super busy then, but even when I came on, like you were doing things like on the official Facebook page, you were posting run cards, like you would post, run cards after every incident. And one thing I tell about people when I recruit them is like, Durham is the place. Like we get a lot of fires, and you go on our page and you see these run cards. Like it seemed like every other post was like a run card for a structure fire. I'm like, man, for a while I didn't know it was you actually running it, but then I found out it was you, and you just always made sure we did that. So you've always been a prideful guy. You always did things. You, like I said, you were ate up with the fire service. I'm in belief that you would have been content if there was an LOD. Like I always felt that way. Like you're so prideful as far as like if you were to happen to perish in a fire, it would be an honor for you for that to happen. Is when I say that. So I'm glad it didn't happen. I'm glad it didn't happen.
I mean, look, I had a couple of chiefs who apparently I worried on some calls, close calls, right? And one particular call, he came up to me. He was mad. He's like, "Are you trying to get yourself killed?" And I said, "What? No. I'm trying to save people's lives. Like, it's a dangerous job. It is. Your job is to put yourself there for others. I told him I love my family and I want to be home with them. But they had a family too,
right?
And if not us, then who? That's just how I felt. I think a lot of people thought maybe I was a little, when I said, I was about the safety award, like I'll be the last guy to get a safety award. I was usually getting yelled at by the safety officers. But I just think that calculated risk, right? You train, that's what you train for. You're not making irresponsible, especially when you have when I became a captain, you're like these guys. You're responsible for these guys. You're with me. Right. I was just like, and we put ourselves in harm's way more than once, and we had some close calls, and fortunately everything worked out. But we did it to save others. That's what we were doing. Like the trench call at Briar Creek is a good example.
I was about to say, tell us memorable calls. You're walking us right into it. Memorable calls. Like, what are some of your? I always hate the question, what's the worst call you ever had? But what are some things that, like, when you think about, go look back at your span of 33 or 32, however long it was, again, what's a call that sticks out to you, or a call or two that sticks out to you?
Well, the first time I was involved in actually saving someone that lived. I'd been involved in pulling several people out of fires.
I say you and Travis, y'all, I feel like y'all got a lot of grabs.
But they had never made it, And but one night down on Hyde Park, I was on Rescue 1. Me and Captain Faircloth and Joe Thompson were on Rescue 1 then, and we made a grab. It was the engine the pump. Something was wrong with the pump. It's engine 3. They couldn't get it to pump. We VES'd the window. I found the guy on the floor. We were able to get him out. He was burned pretty bad, but he lived. And so that was my first time I was involved in a save. That
was like a single family residence?
Yeah, and that was in 1997, I believe. Up until that point, unfortunately, every grab we'd made, they didn't make it. But that was my first one, and it just was a memorable. I didn't think the guy would make it, honestly, because he was burned. But he did. And it was a good feeling. That was, you mentioned Travis. There was a lot of different grabs made down in East Durham. But that first one was special. It's very special just to know that it's a good feeling knowing, this is finally, you've saved someone here. It's like, a lot of the extrications too I've been involved in where it's like almost impossible. Like you think this is like car wrapped around a power pole about 5 foot off the ground.
Yeah.
Things like that with young teenagers pinned. It's you're like you're trying to keep the power pole from falling on you because it's broken in half. You got people yelling at you not to be in the car. I got in the car. Talk about safety officers. We didn't have them then.
Hey, listen.
And it's like
toe the
things
line,
like that.
toe the line. We always gonna try.
Those calls where you got them out. And it's because of training. It's because of your mentors. I didn't invent anything on this job. I learned from the best, and I'm hoping things that I pass on to the other people that work with me, they're passing it on right now, and hopefully those things are helping people. I guess that trench call there, we went on Rescue 1 was tough, but we did save some guys there. Unfortunately, not everyone made it. So that there's a lot of calls like that. One of the wildest nights I ever worked was Hurricane Fran. Hurricane Fran hit on my birthday. I turned 30 years old, and I remember thinking that I'm not going to make it tonight, and my tombstone's going to read exactly the same date to the same date, 30 years. That's what I thought, and it was.
What was that like? Like how many calls do you think you ran in that time?
Oh, I know we ran. So I was called in. Me and Todd Elliott and Scott Roberts were called in. I don't remember what shift was working, but we were on our break. They put us on a reserve engine up Station 1. It's funny. I made my bed up there like I was going to sleep that night or something. Like I never got laid down. And I think we ran like 18 calls that night, and it was a lot of water rescues and it was the wind. It was a bad hurricane. I mean, it devastated this area. That was a very memorable day. I think I got home the next evening sometime because I think I went in at like 7 that night, and then went home later that evening the next day. And
it just wasn't friend. I remember I was young then, but I remember, power being out for a long time during Fran. And then I know hearing some of the older people, Captain Shazo again, because I worked with him for 10 years, he would tell these stories like the aftermath was almost as bad as the storm because you had a lot of CO poisonings, people heating up their houses, and just they said we're running calls, just a bunch of CO calls during that time because, again, there was no heat, there was no power, people were trying, trees everywhere. I remember going to Hair Cedar right there on Guest Road, getting water because we had to get water. They were saying not to drink the water.
I mean those are memorable things that stick out in my mind. Being before we even started the USAR team, which is Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill combined on our Team 8, Task Force 8. Our technical rescue guys would get deployed because there wasn't a statewide thing. They were just, if you got a rescue team, and we went to Hurricane Floyd, which was down east, and that was me and Andy Sinipoli, who's retired assistant chief now. We were both on Rescue 1 then. We went. There was this dog on a house, and he couldn't get off, and we were able to get him off the roof and into our boat. And when we got back to our base camp, which was at a volunteer fire station, this is in Greene County, North Carolina, down east, this dog wouldn't leave me alone. Like he wouldn't go. Like I said, what about this dog? They're like, well, we don't. The animal shelter's underwater. We can't help the dogs. I'm like, oh man. So he just kept following me everywhere I went. It come time for us to go back to Durham after like a week, and this dog, he would just hang around the base camp. We go out, and get in our boats and go out through neighborhoods and do searches of houses. Come back there'd be this dog, and he was like a kind of a collie mix kind of dog. So I said, I'm taking him with me. So he jumped in the truck with me, brought him home, and we named him Floyd. So he was our dog for, I think Floyd lived like 6 years. He was a great dog. So, but then they started, I think 2002, I believe, maybe 3. They started the USAR program in the state, and I got picked, went to the training, and then we started deploying to hurricanes. Yeah. Basically, there was some building collapses like the one over. You might have been on that one, the Slim Jim factory.
ConAgra. I talked about that when she told us. Yeah,
but I didn't deploy anything on duty. I just deployed to like events, disasters, usually hurricanes.
Yeah.
And I was on that. So I was on the original team until I don't know how many years I was on it.
I mean, you sound like you headed up a lot of stuff. Memorable call I had with you. So you talked about trench, which was, again, we were able to save 2 people, and but everybody didn't get saved. And that was a crazy day. That was actually, that was my first day on Rescue 1.
Was it?
It was so crazy. That was my first day, and that was like the first major incident. And just being first day on Rescue 1 and that happening, and just all the things, like everything didn't go perfect. There were some mistakes made, but
usually calls don't ever go perfect.
But right, there's always a plan A, and then you got to have all the way to plan Z, because it never goes the way you want to. But one of the memorable calls I remember with you, another one was we had a fire. I remember being cold that morning, and it was on Dearborn Drive. I don't know if you remember this. This is right when ladder 1 and ladder 2 switched.
Oh, you were on 7 then?
I was on 7.
I remember that fire.
And I remember it was like a little tiff between ladder 1 and ladder 2 because of how the switch happened. So everyone knew there was like a inner shift little tizzy going on. So
by the way, that captain and me are best friends.
Hey,
I love him.
Hey,
at the time there was
it was a little tension.
Two aggressive guys on the 2 main ladder companies in Durham. You're gonna have a little.
Yeah,
it's just the nature of people.
We
laugh about it now.
Yeah, naturally, y'all switch companies. Yeah. You didn't want to go to that company, and he didn't. So, you didn't want to go to the company So, I remember that fire though, because I remember Brian Perry. Shout out, he was my driver then. He had a nozzle because that's when 7 had the 2 drivers, captains, and it was 1 firefighter, and I was a firefighter. But Brian was on the back, and he pulled the nozzle. And I remember opening the door and he looked like the flame on. He was engulfed in flames. He looked like the Human Torch. And then I actually had a nozzle. He forced the door. And he was like, open up the nozzle. And I was like, it's open. And he's like, put on fog. Because he wanted the protection. Because he was literally covered in fire. And so, but I remember that day inside the fire, we're in there. And I was going back and forth between you guys and then my crew. Because I would run over here and hit the fire, and it would come on.
We were searching.
Y'all were searching. Yeah. And I remember you was like, McCoy over here. And I run over there, put the fire out. They'd be like, McCoy over here. And I was going back and forth all day. And then we found out the day after what really happened was this guy took out the roof, the ceiling in his house. He was using the wood. I guess it was tongue and groove. He was using the wood to build the dog houses. He built dog houses. Yeah. And he took his roof. So what happened was
the ceiling out.
The ceiling out. Yeah. So there was a hole in one room.
It opened up a big area.
A big area. Yeah. So
a lot of fire above us.
A lot of fire
blowing out the gable.
Blowing out the gable.
Yeah.
And so I just remember that call because I remember it felt like this fire would not go out no matter what we did. And eventually we got it out. But that's one thing I remember with you. Now, I have a question for you. Before we get to that, you mentioned your son's on Winston-Salem. Is that his company shirt?
He was on this one. He's not there, and he said
so
changed.
I do a feature. So today's shirt is what company is that?
This is Ladder 5, Engine 5. That was his first assignment. Was Engine 5.
Engine 5 in
Winston.
Is that a pretty busy station?
Oh yeah. A lot of fires. Winston's a very busy department.
So I tell people, I don't know a lot about Winston other than what you tell me, because people always tell people like Durham is where you want to be at, like this is where you want to be at, and obviously I would give Charlotte their due credit because they're also a great department too.
Great department.
But I remember you telling me when he went to Winston, you was like, hey, Winston get a lot of fire, man. Like
they get a lot of fire. Yeah.
They get a lot of fire. So shout out to Dalton and Winston-Salem Fire Department. My feature today is again Captain Boone. This is something that he did. This is Station 2's old company patch. And like I said, he always was very into the culture, and he created a lot of patches. So this was.
So funny, that patch there.
This replaced
actually,
Deuces as well, right? This one that replaced.
Yeah, that when the squad and chief moved out, it was just 2 companies. So that is actually a ripoff of my cousin. His name was Kevin Ramsey. He's a line of duty death in Detroit.
Yes.
That was his patch for Squad 3, Engine 23 in Detroit. And so I copied his patch and made our patch up because it had a bull. And we're the Bull City.
Right.
Not sure why they had a bull, but that's why I copied it, because it had the bull.
Right.
So Kevin and me, a couple weeks apart being born. He grew up in Detroit. His family moved to Detroit back in the 50s for work. A lot of people from Western North Carolina moved to Detroit, including my grandparents. My mom lived in Detroit for several years, like 3 years. Then they moved back to Western North Carolina. But Kevin's parents, they stayed there. So, unfortunately, Kevin was a line of duty death. But it was just odd. I have other cousins who were in the fire service, and we didn't even know we were. When Kevin came to my grandpa's funeral in '95, I said, "What do you do for a living?" Because I'm a firefighter. I'm like, "So am I." Like, it was weird. And then I have another cousin who's a firefighter up in Montgomery County, up near Asheville. And I have another cousin who is an assistant chief of Pensacola Volunteer Fire Department in Western Yancey County. And then another cousin who was a paramedic for many years and a volunteer firefighter. So didn't even know that my relatives were also in the fire service at the time when I found out that they were.
That's awesome.
So that was just kind of an odd thing.
Yeah.
You know,
so
that was their patch.
It's in the blood. So it's kind of like in memory of Kevin Ramsey.
Yeah.
And then it just became a cool company patch. So we had a segment where you get to ask a question to someone else, but before you ask that question, Chief Z left a question for you. He didn't know it was going to be you, but it's just a question to the next guest. So his question was, what advice would your younger self give your older self in the fire service?
It would be to be patient. You have to be patient. Things don't come about as quickly as you want sometimes. You might not get the assignment you want. You might not get a lot of people put in for classes. Not everybody gets to go because there's not enough openings for the amount of people who want to go. Patience is very important in the fire service. You have to know that, hey, it's a long career. You might start out at a slower station and you want to be at a busier station. Be patient.
Just grind.
Just keep grinding. I didn't get, just like I didn't get hired on the fire department the first 2 times I applied. I never got promoted when I first applied either. You don't take those things personal. Sometimes it's hard not to, because you're like, why didn't I get? It's some of it. Is not just a written test. A lot of it's interviews and whatever. But you have to. You just keep, like you say, keep grinding. And I think I got impatient early in my career. That's just stress you don't need.
Yeah.
Life has got enough stresses in it without you worrying about the little things. And they're not little, because you do want, like, I didn't even like filling in at a slow station.
Right.
And I normally work busy stations my whole career. I didn't want to miss out on anything. I wanted to be busy, but just be patient. And so that would be advice for myself. If I could go back, I would have been so impatient, and I was impatient because I wanted to fight every fire. I wanted to go to every wreck. I wanted to go to everything. It's like, you can't, and that would probably be
in due time.
Yeah.
Because, and I messed up the question. It's older self to younger self, but you get the gist. But with that being said, I tell people all the time that I tell them, listen, if you don't make it this process, keep going. We have people, who had to apply 3-4 times before they got on, and their parents are in the fire service. So don't.
Well, that was a question that was asked to me by one of the on my review board, my 3rd time, which is the time I got hired. One of the chiefs asked me, he said, Mr. Boone, I've seen you here before. I said, this is my 3rd time. said, if you don't get hired this time, what you going to do? And I said, I'll be back here again. He says, you know what? I believe you. And that's just how it was. I was not going to give up. I was going to keep it. And I actually had friends that were on other departments saying, why don't I apply there? And I said, because I want to be a Durham firefighter. That's what I want to be.
Why did you want to be a Durham firefighter?
Well, I knew how busy they were. I knew already once I started investigating the fire service. And shout out to retired Captain David Jacobs. David Jacobs and me worked together. We worked for Harris Teeter grocery store. I actually talked David into applying.
I just seen him like 2 weeks ago.
Well, David applied. I talked him into applying. He got hired and I didn't.
Wow, that's crazy.
So David kept me in the loop.
Yeah.
And he said, hey, why don't you go talk to Captain Tony Freeman at Station 3 or Captain Robert Gaddy at 6. Go talk to some of these captains. They're really into the job. They'll be glad to talk to you. So I already knew right away before I even got in. Like I already knew where I wanted to work. Like I knew where I didn't want to work. Not because of anything bad about the people there. Just I wanted to work where it was busy. And not every station is as busy as the other ones. So, I knew this already coming in, right? So I knew that this other city over here or that city over there, they're not as busy as Durham. Or maybe they're not as aggressive because Durham had a great reputation as a really aggressive department. They were, inside out. They weren't hitting it from the yard. They were going in. They were aggressive. They were getting a lot of work. So I thought, well, why? I want to be a firefighter, but I want to be a Durham firefighter. So that was my mentality, my thinking at that time. In hindsight, maybe I should have, and I would have got out of the grocery store, but I might have ended up staying there and never coming to Durham too. I think a lot of things are just meant to be. I was meant to be a Durham firefighter. I was meant to work my whole career here. And so yeah, if you're not getting hired, don't give up. Don't ever think that, and ask, why am I not getting hired? I would ask that. Admin knew who I was because I came by and taught. It's like, you're just, a lot of people were applying back then, especially. It was a different time where, there wasn't as many jobs as there is now. This area wasn't like it is now. I mean, there's so many jobs here now, so many choices for young people. There really wasn't back then. So you had, a couple, 2,500 people applying. There was only 11 people in my academy. That's it. Yeah. 11 people. That's it. A couple thousand people applied for that spot. So you got to keep it in mind. It's all relative too. Like, why am I not getting hired? Well, maybe it's just hard. It's hard. It's hard to get hired.
The fire service.
It's hard to get hired.
In general, it's hard to get into. So
I mean, especially back then. Like I say, I don't know today as many people aspire. It is a blue collar job. People need to understand that. It's a dirty job. It's a working person's job. You're going to work. It's not just riding around a cool fire truck, looking good. You're going to work. You're going to get dirty. And in your case, you're going to get some people who come into it and say, this isn't for me. And that's great. It's better to get out at the start
than take a job.
Than to stay on in there.
Yeah.
So, but, that's great advice to anybody. Don't give up. If it's your dream to be on the fire department, wherever it is, keep at it, keep grinding, and it'll eventually come true.
Radio said it best. Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't quit. You ever see that movie? No. That was terrible. All right, listen. So, wrapping up here, what's one question that you want to ask our next guest? What's something that you want to, just a random question?
Random question. I guess, what job would you, if you couldn't have been a firefighter, what would you have liked to have done?
That is a good question. I like that. Well, listen, Captain Boone, I appreciate you coming here. I appreciate the opportunity you gave me being on a rescue truck. Like I said, I was on A shift the whole time with you. You're a great person. Great.
Thank you.
I don't know any firefighter that has a passion that you have for the job. I just want to say again, thank you for the time. Thank you for everything that you've done for the department, because you've done a lot. and I just appreciate it. Patrick, do you have anything going out here?
Yeah, I'll say my normal piece now. Thank you guys for tuning in, listening, or watching. Appreciate Cat Boone coming in and spending some time with us. If you want to help us out, please subscribe to the podcast, whether you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're watching or listening. Please subscribe. Please follow us on social media. That is Durham City Fire on Instagram, Durham Fire Department on Facebook, and you've got Join Durham FD on both Facebook and Instagram for those of you that are looking to get into the job. And yeah, good episode. Enjoyed listening to Captain Boone. Tim, I'm going to give it back to you. Let's close this out.
Once again, we're here with episode 2 with the historian, the legendary Captain Sean Boone. Again, you guys like, follow, subscribe, and if you have questions, please write in the comments. Send it to us. We'll make sure we put it on the show. Captain Boone.
Thank you, Tim.
I appreciate you, buddy. Thank you for everything.
You.
And this is Bull City Bravest. Until next time, I'll holler at you.